Chapter 2. Beneath the Stones, Part 1, The Descent. The entrance to the Undercity was, like most things in Quandaria, hidden in plain sight. To the uninitiated, it looked like nothing more than a derelict storefront, its windows boarded up and its door hanging askew. But I knew better. I approached the seemingly abandoned building, glancing over my shoulder to ensure I wasn't being followed. The amulet Lyria had given me hung heavy around my neck, its magic a constant subtle hum against my skin. I hoped it was doing its job of blurring the edges, as she had put it. With a quick mutter of an unlocking spell and a touch of my wand to the doorknob, I slipped inside. The interior was pitch black, but I knew better than to cast a light spell. In the Undercity, light was as good as a beacon announcing your presence to every cutthroat and ne'er-do-well in the vicinity. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone, a night-eye charm. I pressed it to my forehead, feeling the cool tingle of magic as it activated. The world around me shifted, the darkness retreating to reveal shapes in shades of grey and silver. At the back of the room, barely visible behind a stack of mouldering crates, was a trapdoor. I made my way over, carefully avoiding the tripwire I knew was there, a nasty surprise for any unwanted visitors. With another touch of my wand and a whispered word, the trapdoor swung open silently, revealing a set of roughly hewn stone steps descending into the gloom. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The Undercity was a world unto itself, a sprawling network of tunnels and caverns that honeycombed the earth beneath Quandaria. It was a place where the city's outcasts, criminals, and those who preferred to live beyond the reach of law made their home. It was also a place where fortunes could be made or lost in the blink of an eye, and where life was often measured in how quickly you could draw your wand. As I began my descent, the air grew thick with a scent of damp stone and something less pleasant. The steps were slick with moisture, and I had to watch my footing carefully. The last thing I needed was to break my neck before I even reached Grimlock's shop. After what felt like an eternity of downward spiral, the stairs opened up into a vast cavern. The Undercity spread out before me, a chaotic jumble of ramshackle buildings, winding alleys and flickering magical lights. The ceiling of the cavern was lost in darkness, giving the unsettling impression that the city was suspended in an endless void. I pulled out a crumpled piece of parchment from my pocket, a crude map of the Undercity I'd acquired years ago. It wasn't particularly accurate. The geography of this place tended to shift like the tides, but it was better than nothing. Grimlock's curios and collectibles, I muttered, scanning the map. Should be somewhere in the Rust Ward. I set off, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. The denizens of the Undercity were a motley crew, hunched figures in tattered robes, beings that seemed more shadow than substance, and creatures that defied description. Most paid me no mind, too wrapped up in their own business to care about another stranger in their midst. As I navigated the twisting alleys, my mind wandered back to Lyria and her cryptic warnings. What was this key truly capable of? And more importantly, what would happen if it fell into the wrong hands? My musings were interrupted by a commotion up ahead. A crowd had gathered around what looked like a makeshift fighting pit. Raucous cheers and the clang of metal on metal filled the air. Ordinarily, I would have given such a spectacle a wide berth, but something caught my eye. Among the spectators, I spotted a figure that seemed out of place, too well dressed for this part of the Undercity, and standing too still amidst the jostling crowd. As I watched, the figure's head turned, and for a split second, I caught a glimpse of eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. Was this one of the Veiled Hand? Or perhaps a guardian of the eternal flame? Before I could decide whether to investigate further, the figure melted into the crowd, disappearing as if it had never been there at all. Damn it, I muttered, quickening my pace. If the other factions were already down here, I was running out of time. Finally, after several wrong turns and one close call with a group of goblin pickpockets, I found myself standing before a shopfront that looked like it had been cobbled together from the wreckage of a dozen different buildings. A faded sign swung gently in the stagnant air, Grimlock's curios and collectibles, treasures from every realm. I took a moment to gather myself, checking that my wand was easily accessible and that Lyria's amulet was still in place. Whatever lay beyond that door could be the key to unraveling this whole mystery. Or it could be a deadly trap. Only one way to find out. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door and stepped into Grimlock's domain, the tinkling of an enchanted bell announcing my arrival. The interior of the shop was a hoarder's fever dream. Every surface was crowded with objects of every description, glowing crystals, stuffed creatures that looked like they'd never existed in nature, books bound in materials I couldn't identify, and contraptions whose purposes I couldn't begin to guess. And there, behind a cluttered counter, stood a figure that could only be Grimlock Ironbeard himself. The dwarf was as gnarled and weathered as an ancient oak, his beard a tangled mass that seemed to have a life of its own. His eyes, magnified to an absurd degree by thick spectacles, fixed on me with unnerving intensity. "Well, well," Grimlock's voice was like gravel in a meat grinder. "What brings a topside gumshoe down to my humble establishment? Looking for something special, are we?" I approached the counter, trying to project an air of casual interest. "Heard you might have come across something interesting recently. Something that doesn't quite fit with your usual stock." Grimlock's bushy eyebrows shot up, nearly disappearing into his hairline. "Oh ho! Heard that, did you? And who might have been whispering such tales in your ear, I wonder?" I shrugged noncommittally. "You know how it is. Word gets around." The dwarf's eyes narrowed, and I could almost see the gears turning behind those magnified orbs. "Aye, that it does. But not all words are worth the breath used to speak them, if you catch my meaning." I was about to press further when a sound from the back of the shop caught my attention. It was faint, barely audible over the constant hum and whir of the various magical objects in the room, but unmistakable, the sound of breaking glass, followed by a muffled curse. Grimlock's head whipped around, his expression shifting from suspicion to alarm. "Blazes and brimstone," he growled. Before I could react, the back wall of the shop exploded inward in a shower of splintered wood and magical energy. Through the debris stepped a figure wreathed in shadows, its eyes glowing with the same unnatural light I'd seen in the crowd earlier. "The key," a voice hissed, somehow both here and not here. "Give us the key, dwarf, or face the wrath of the veiled hand." And just like that, my simple investigation had turned into a three-way standoff in a room full of unpredictable magical artifacts.